That was really good. I really like the rhythm of that one. That wasn't quite as choppy with the hands. Good one. Good one. That was one of your better ones.
John, I wanted to look at your chipping technique. This is the first one where it was a little bit shorter, only 5 yards off the edge of the green. And this was with, I believe, your sand wedges before we did the second round with the pitching wedge. I'm going to compare it to my technique, and I flip myself around on the video so that I'm left-handed. Your feet are close together, basically touching each other. Mine are a little further apart. Wanted to compare the two swings and particularly get a comparison of how much wrist hinge you have versus what I have in the length of the swing itself. This software package that I have for video analysis allows me to check and measure angles. At the setup, I have a 140-degree angle at the back of my left hand, and you have a 146-degree angle. The smaller number is a greater angle. Now we're going to see how much that angle changes when we get to the end of the backswing. When I get to the end of my backswing, I increased my angle in the back of my left hand by 16 degrees. When you got to the end of your backswing, you increased your angle by 35 degrees. So you increased the angle behind the back of your left wrist almost twice as much as mine, and you did it in a shorter backswing length. So you started with less wrist angle at the beginning, and when you got to the end of your backswing, you had more wrist angle than I did. Now let's see how much these angles change when we get to impact. We will be able to see how many degrees were released into the golf ball. Now we're at impact, and I have 137 degrees of angle at impact. And so I release 13 degrees of angle in my wrist in the downswing. You have 150 degrees of angle at impact, starting with 111 at the end of your backswing. So you release 39 degrees of angle, much more than I did. So you had a much more of a wrist hinge in the backswing, which required you to have more release of angle in the downswing. So we are validating what visually looked like a wristy swing. We're actually validating that with some hard numbers as evidence of a lot more wrist action during your swing. This wristier technique will require a lot more practice because it's a more complicated technique. The timing will be much more difficult to be consistent with. After this first round with the sand wedge, you did a second round with the pitching wedge. So let's look at how that might have changed some of these numbers. On the right is the second round with the pitching wedge. Let's look at the angles at the setup. 158 versus 146. Remember, the larger the number, the less angle there is in the back of the left hand. Okay, now we're at the end of the backswing, and the wrist angle is 121 degrees versus 111 degrees. So your wrist angle at the end of your backswing using the pitching wedge has a little less angle in it than you had when you were using your sand wedge. Now we're going to start the downswing and stop it at impact. At impact, you have 155 degrees versus 150 with the sand wedge. So you have 5 degrees less angle in the back of your left wrist at impact than you did with the sand wedge. So at impact, you had much less wrist action during the swing. The other thing that I had you work on was swinging the chest to the target. Let your body help you swing the club through the ball and not letting your hands do all the work. And let's look at that action as you come through here. You can see how your leg, you just look at your knees and your hips. There's not a lot of movement there. You're basically all hands and arms here. And when you get to the end of the swing, your shoulders are about right here. Now as we look at your pitching wedge swing, where you're focusing on moving that chest a little bit more, you watch that back leg, you'll see a lot more action. You see the daylight between the knees, and then you turn the hip much more. And then when you get to the end of your swing, your shoulders are facing the target a lot more. Your sternum in the front of your chest is turned to the target a lot more. So you're able to keep your arms very straight and in front of your chest to a better degree than with the sand wedge. So all three of these adjustments that you made for this shot, this 5 yards off the edge of the green, you went with a little less lofted club, which allowed you to have less club head speed with a simpler and smaller wrist action, a little bit wider stance so you could have better control and management of your weight, and then allowing you to turn your body more. All of those things collectively is going to give you much better results, particularly when you practice it enough where it's extremely comfortable to do this technique. There's no question in my mind, as you go forward for this bump and run shot, you need to adopt the technique and the lofted club on the right. I happen to have grabbed a pitching wedge. There'll be other shots around the green where the appropriate club may be the gap wedge or the 9-iron. That's where your practice can identify the right club for the right shot. But the technique needs to be with your feet a little further apart and let your chest swing the club.